Massive protests across China. They were sparked by the country's strict COVID-19 policies, but now it's turning into a call for political reform. Let's talk about it with Jake Werner from the Quincy Institute, who's up late with me tonight on the Final Five. Jake, thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, glad to be here.
China has this, what they're calling the zero COVID policy. And as a result, when there's an outbreak, it seems that they go into these massive lockdowns far beyond anything that we saw here in the United States. Obviously, there's been a lot of frustration over that, but it looks like now that is snowballing into some other expressions of discontent.
Yes, there was, in particular, the thing that sort of set off the fire here was there was a building fire in a provincial capital, Urumqi, in the west of China. 10 people died in the fire, and it seems that part of the reason for that was that obstacles to help enforce the COVID lockdown, which has been going on for 100 days in Urumqi, prevented firefighters from reaching the fire in time, and that danger of like just having fire escapes sealed off, people being shut in their apartment buildings. That really resonated, along with just the general frustration of the extremity of the lockdowns, and people across China have come out into the streets and made demands about reducing the severity of the restrictions, and importantly, also made political demands.
Yeah, we're looking at some of these. We're looking at some of these protests right now on the screen. I mean, because I got to tell you, I remember the early days of COVID, where we saw a lot of these images of people, again, as you said, being locked in their homes. There were drones surveilling them. It was very strict out there. But when you talk about the expressions, the political ramifications of this all, there are a lot of people expressing discontent, unhappiness, and those are very mild words to describe it, about the Xi Jinping regime as a whole.
Yes, and this is just weeks after the Communist Party Congress that ratified an unprecedented third term for Xi Jinping as the party secretary. So that sort of led to a sense of, frustration, even despair on the part of a lot of people who were hoping for an opening up after 10 years of increasingly repressive politics in China. And that is what turned the protests political as well, is a demand for greater political openness, for the ability to just express criticisms of the government. Very basic political rights have been voiced, but we haven't heard these kinds of demands over the 10 years that Xi Jinping has been in power.
We know that President Biden met with Xi not too long ago on the sidelines of a world summit. It sounds as though the White House says, when it comes to these protests, what they're seeing, they're sort of welcoming these expressions, not necessarily getting involved per se, but it seems that they're supporting a right to protest their government there. Does this impact the U.S.-China relationship, making those comments?
I think the Biden administration has pursued a fairly cautious response, has not sort of made aggressive comments about supporting the protesters, has not endorsed the idea of overthrowing Xi Jinping or something, a slogan that we've heard at a couple of the protests. Instead, what they've said is, we don't think a zero COVID policy is going to work, and we support people's right to protest. And this really shouldn't be an extreme expression on the part of the Biden administration, given that right is enshrined in the Chinese Constitution. So I think, importantly, though, that the cautious approach coming out of the Biden administration is really what we should be pursuing here. Unfortunately, because the hostility between the U.S. and China has gotten worse and worse over the last 5 years, the credibility and the reputation of the United States within China has really suffered. And if the U.S. comes out and really embraces the protesters, that presents the danger of discrediting the protesters in the eyes of many Chinese people, who increasingly see the United States trying to prevent China from succeeding. So I think the approach the Biden administration has taken is the right one here.
All right, Jake Werner from the Quincy Institute, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
And the Final Five is back right after this.